listening to Peak One Sports.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Sports Page on the Peak One Sports Network. I'm Ashton with Chris and Dan as always. And man, if this is the episode you want to listen to, it's the correct one. I know you all have a lot of things to talk about. Get out there, talking Cowboys and what the hell is going to be done with the Cowboys. A lot of questions to answer. What happened, what's going to happen, and we'll get to all that. Don't worry, you just sit there in your hot seat.
What happened?
You sit there on your
What
hot seat.
happened?
Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Peak One Sports. Hit the follow button if you're listening to us on your favorite podcasting app. And this episode is brought to you by Betalytics. Don't bet with your gut. Check out Betalytics and get help making your picks using AI algorithms. Use promo code PEAK1 for 25% off when you sign up today. Go to Betalytics.com to start betting smarter. And I guess we will start with you, Dan. You cannot contain yourself.
Man,
Clearly, I mean, we've all heard everything. Everybody's Cowboys fans, Cowboys haters. What's happened? Just had time to digest it. Still a lot of raw emotions, but go ahead, Dan, and give us your thoughts.
man, I came in here. I feel like one of the main reasons like you invited me onto the sports page is because you and I had kind of had a conversation where I came out with like some pretty strong kind of negative opinions about Dak Prescott and his like inability to like just kind of come through in big games, his inaccuracy, and just man, I just do not know what happened in this game. And don't get me wrong either, because like I want to put a lot of blame on Dak Prescott in this game, but the Cowboys defense didn't exactly help him out either. You know what I mean? But like, man, this whole game, like I'm just watching him miss guys by like a foot outside. He's like he was so inaccurate, you know, and it was like I most of the interceptions that he threw were his fault. That big pick six was all his fault. He led his man by an extra like foot and a half that just
Trying to force
missed
it
its mark
to CeeDee
completely.
Lamb.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was, man. I feel like everybody even knew that play coming up, like they were
And
gonna
they
feed
know
this to him.
they try to force it, but they know they saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And I had
man, it
thoughts
was
on
crazy
that
too.
play that I was thinking the whole game he kept trying to force it to CeeDee Lamb, and I'm like, dude, you've had this
The whole
chemistry
game.
all year. I was like, just relax. You're gonna get it back, and to some extent they did. It worked, but he kept trying to force it, and I think, and I'll get into it later. I think that was really the defining point of the game, which
No,
kind
it
of
was
it
definitely.
kind of put you. Not that there was any other hope any other time, but I'll go through that in a minute. Go ahead and finish.
Yeah, no, I mean, the game was over. Hope was lost by halftime. Um, and honestly, it still drives me crazy because, like what I said when I first came onto the show, like Dak Prescott is this quarterback that, like, no matter what happens with him and the Cowboys, whether the Cowboys were to release him or trade him or whatever, he would end up going somewhere because on paper, he looks like an elite quarterback. But the reality is, he's not. And man, and this game was like the perfect epitome of that, right? Because they were absolutely blown out by the time halftime hit. There was almost no chance. Now I've seen crazier things happen in sports. I'm not trying to say that the Cowboys couldn't have made like an incredible comeback in that second half, but it seemed very unlikely, very improbable. Not impossible, but very improbable. And the fact that Dak still comes out of this game with a 400-yard passing game and 3 touchdowns is absolutely insane to me because he never stood a chance in this game. He never even gave the Cowboys an opportunity to look competitive in this game. By the time I can't stop saying it. By the time halftime hit, that game was over. He had already thrown 3 interceptions. Well, and honestly, two of them were basically pick six. I know the one was like returned to what, like the 15 or something like that, and the other one was an
Yeah.
actual pick six. But I mean, they scored on both of them. And you know, you go into halftime. What it was 27-7, and that that touchdown that they managed to score before halftime felt like junk. You know, like it just felt like a garbage time kind of touchdown there at the end, but it didn't feel like it meant anything because we were down so much. And kind of like what you were just saying a minute ago, it felt like they kept forcing the ball to CD Lamb. I don't know why they weren't trying to use like Ferguson more or get like
Ferguson had a
Cooks
great game.
or Gallup, somebody else involved more.
Gallup had a
And
pretty
but
good game too.
the worst thing that was killing me in this though was like it looked like Dak wasn't even going through progressions. He looked like he was being so lazy in this game. He was literally like, as soon as he snapped the ball, he was looking at who he was going to throw the ball to, and that's who he threw the ball to. And I'm confident that's why Green Bay managed to get the turnovers that they got. Obviously, like I'm honestly just I'm so torn up about Dak and everything. Like I don't even care about the defense and their inability to stop Jordan Love and all the points that they managed to give up and everything. When you're talking about like an elite quarterback, quote unquote, like Dak Prescott, and you send him into a game like this, 16 win streak at home. You have the home field advantage. It's an indoor game, so you can't even blame it on all the crazy weather that was going around for the playoffs. Like there's like no excuse for the performance the Cowboys put into this game. If they would have lost the game by like a field goal or like an overtime tough loss or something, that'd be one thing. But getting absolutely blown out by halftime is insane to me. Like it makes no sense to me. And honestly, like I feel like a big part of the whole thing that's blowing my mind is just the sheer fact that like it feels like every good team in the playoffs had like this implosion. Like the Eagles go 10-1 and then they're 1-5 over their last 6 games. Miami basically did the same thing. Just like what an insane kind of first wild card round for like what I feel like were all the better teams that you expect that you definitely expect to like win this
Yeah.
week. But man, Dak Prescott, I just and the worst part is nothing will happen. Like nothing's gonna happen. The Cowboys can't get rid of him. It'll cost them too much money.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna release him. You're not gonna trade him. I honestly can't imagine who's gonna take the cap hit if you tried to trade him or anything. And even if you did try to trade him, who are you gonna trade him for?
Yeah, you would theoretically, if that was even possible, I mean, people would be like, take the 1 year hit and you're going to get a first round pick back. But I don't think that because of his cap situation, I honestly think you're giving away picks for somebody to take him.
I agree.
But the thought
But I
on
mean,
Jordan,
he screwed the Cowboys when he like demanded the long term big money contract.
yeah,
And I mean, I was saying then like he's not worth it. You give him like a 2 or 3 year contract, he's not worth this. What do you end up getting like a 6 year deal?
they can get out of it after this year, but um, that would assume they don't sign him to an extension, which they're basically tied to. They have to. If you don't
Yeah.
sign, if you just say let's run with it, it's 54.1 or $51.4 million cap hit, maybe even more than that. Which if you have any intention of competing next year, you can't because you have other players to sign to. You can't just outright cut him. It's like a $63 million cap hit not to have him. So the Cowboys do have a window here that you're not just going to get rid of, especially Jerry Jones being, of higher age. He wants to get something done. So,
You might get stuff.
yeah, you'll sign him to an extension. So next year's cap hits like 40 million or something, whatever
Yeah.
they can, and then they just keep pushing it off. And then eventually, Dak's not even able to do anything. He's just an overblown, overpaid quarterback. Not even during the regular season. And you're just kind of eating that money. I mean, you ate Tony Romo money after like 3 or 4 years after he retired. That's what it's going to take. But thoughts on Jordan Love, the way if he doesn't turn out to be a superstar player, I don't know if it'd make me feel worse, but it would make a lot of less sense if he doesn't, because it was just like Aaron Rodgers-esque, where
What a turnaround
there
for this
there
kid
were
too.
their defense just wasn't terrible every single play. Like they would give up ridiculous plays, somebody's wide open, but they would get pressure on him and he'd be throwing off his back foot and then find this wide open receiver.
Yeah. Dobbs, he
Yeah.
151 yards. Like I was like, who's Dobbs? I haven't talked about this game since the game, and I've kind of just been, just going about my day, just
Just
receiving
letting it brew and stew.
all the tweets I'm in Chicago, so like, of course I was talking trash. Like, the Cowboys, the easy one, what I'm saying? Because they hate the Packers up here, but they were kind of rooting for the Cowboys because,
Yeah.
they Packers, but you know, I, talk so much trash about the Cowboys. Dak probably will finish third in the MVP voting or something like that this year. And I'm like, yeah, this is the year. This is the year. I tweeted, yeah, I'm wearing my Cowboys jersey because I want Chicago people to see what winning football is like. And then I get my own tweet sent back to me that same day saying winning football question mark. So like,
Yeah. Regular
it's
season winning. I mean,
it's just very
the first
frustrating.
team in NFL history to finish with 12 wins in 3 straight seasons and not make a conference championship in any of those 3 seasons.
It's
Yeah,
it's
bravo.
I
Great
mean,
job.
right.
since 2000, I bet you the Cowboys, I haven't looked up the stat, but I bet you they're top 10 in regular season wins.
I think they are.
They have
Uh,
4 playoff wins since then. So Tom
and
Brady uh, had just as many wins in probably 4 or 5 different seasons by himself.
I
yeah,
want to say I saw the Cowboys' last 8 playoff appearances ended in the first round.
Their first, no, I mean they won last year.
last year. And
Um,
Oh yeah,
and
you
they
see,
won a couple of divisional rounds. I mean, they got a couple of buys in divisional rounds with
they did
Romo
get
and
wild card and then lost to who they played. They lost to Green Bay that year
yeah, Green
let's
Bay.
see, they
because Dak has
Was
one
that
play.
the Des
Dak
Cotty
has
year?
2 playoff wins. Dak
Yeah,
beat Seattle and lost to the Rams, and then he beat they beat last year. They beat the Bucks and then
yeah.
lost. Yeah. So they have because Roma had 2 playoff wins, so they have
Yeah.
4 playoff wins total, but
Well,
they
yeah,
haven't
that
made it
makes
past
sense
the
because
division round.
Yeah.
yeah, because they did point out at the beginning of the game, Dak's 2-4 in
Yeah.
playoff games, two and
It's just
five now.
frustrating because like you guys said that you know the Eagles they didn't they I feel like they limped into the playoffs. I feel like Dallas had a pretty good rhythm going into the playoffs. I was like, okay, that's a big win. They beat the Lions and then they beat Washington pretty thoroughly. So I was like, okay, they're right on cue, just keep it rolling. And they just got punched in the face. And it was just like one of those things where it's like they did not know how to respond. When you're down 28-0, Dan, like you said, the last touchdown, I actually had a little hope after they scored that touchdown at halftime because they were getting the ball at half, and I was like, okay, maybe they can just get it rolling because I think it was against Green Bay. They were down 21 and they came back and took the lead, and then Aaron Rodgers to Jared Cook. Was that the same game? If I'm not mistaken, but
I,
it was
I think
Yeah.
I lost faith after um he basically just handed off to the defender whenever he was trying to force CD, and it was just a walk-in touchdown. I knew where he was going before the play was, so I already know Green Bay knew where he was going. So it was just like one of those things. Where they really lost, I believe, I wrote it down. So they had 16 third downs.
Yeah. Third down.
That means first and second down, you weren't doing what you were supposed to do. Uh, Pollard averaged what, two? I mean, how many? I don't know. He had 56 yards rushing. But that,
He had a few pretty good
yeah,
runs early on, but then when you get down 27-0, I mean that's why
yeah, he
Dak had
abandoned the
300
run.
something or had 400
and
yards
I,
because you're coming for playing
I
for
looked at
behind.
the stats. I didn't even know he had 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and I was like, dang, what
403.
the fuck? But that's just a Dak Prescott game. He's
Well, you're
out
down from behind.
there.
Packers put second stringers in. They took their foot off the gas. That's why a lot of people says like, man, just you could point to 1 or 2 things because really, if that didn't happen, it's a 1 possession game. And I was like, no, you can't because they didn't put it together in the second half. They played better, but I mean, offensively anyway. But Green Bay just took their foot off the gas.
They're
That's the only reason it seemed
No,
like
they
it was
yeah.
closer.
already won. Yeah. And then Aaron Jones is he's a Cowboy killer. He every time he plays the Cowboys, he has 3 touchdowns.
Boy is he.
I should have.
So
I think I mentioned that last show about how Aaron Jones always
yeah,
kills it.
yeah, you
Uh,
did.
but it was just he just has like I don't know what it is. Every time he sees the Cowboys, he turns into like Barry Sanders or like something like all time great because every time you watch him, he's throwing the football in the stands, and it's just like okay, when will we stop him? And then Jordan Love making incredible passes, incredible throws, and like you guys said, I think he's a definite start. I think he's gonna be one of
Yeah,
those.
just yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because
he,
it wasn't like they just weren't guarding guys or whatever. They were running zone most of the game or a lot of the game. I'm not sure why.
I don't
And
know.
then they would lose them. So Jordan Love was facing that adversity. Micah Parsons was on him many times. He was getting that pressure. He was just able to make the throws. And yeah, the guys were wide open. But he's keeping the ball alive long enough, that extra couple of seconds to make those throws. Um, but I
I
want to
don't.
go back to that pick six because when you look at it, it's 20 to nothing, and you have the ball, and I hated that they kept trying to feed CD Lamb. I thought Ferguson's having a good game, Gallup ended up having a good game. Move the ball around, and that will come, and it did come. CD Lamb had like 9 catches,
Yeah,
nearly 100 yards. It eventually worked, but I think he just kept trying. And like you said, Chris, we all saw it coming. But that drive, if you score a touchdown, which is very possible because you throw a pick six and then come right back and score a touchdown,
mhm.
you score a touchdown right there at the end of the half, and then get the ball right back. And
It's a
if you're
great.
able to score a touchdown again, it's 20 to 14, and then you have that young Packer team thinking, "Crap, we were just up 20 to nothing. They don't have any playoff experience. Maybe they start panicking a little bit." I don't know that necessarily changes things or just delays it because the Cowboys defense could not get them off the field on third down to save
Oh,
their life because really they were stopping Aaron Jones on first down.
person. Yeah.
They were getting him to third down.
Mm.
And then they just, and I kept thinking that this is kind of what this defense has done most of the year. They haven't been a dominant stop defense. What they've done is they've been a bend but not break, and then they get a good timely turnover
Mhm.
is what they've been doing, and then they just didn't get that turnover. And and honestly, people saying, well, it doesn't matter what Dak would have done because the defense wouldn't have helped him out. Well, I turn that around. It doesn't matter if what the defense did because Dak wasn't helping himself anyways. Really, say 48 points, 7 of those points were from a pick six. And then really you could argue another 6 points because they missed the extra point were from the first interception because they got the ball at the 19-yard line or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Dak
saying.
wasn't doing his defense any good. Um, if, like I say, if you don't throw that pick six, maybe things happen where maybe one of those third downs you're able to stop them and get them to punt. That's all it changes for the momentum. When it's 27-7 going into halftime, they don't. And really, you came out and almost scored a touchdown. You had the ball. I don't think it was quite in the red zone, but you moved the ball, and then all of a sudden you're kicking a field goal. I don't remember if it was first or second half, but
Yeah.
Dak Prescott he's looking down CD Lamb, reads him, he's covered, he runs over to his right, completely misses Ferguson wide open, and then he ends up getting sacked he was nowhere near the pocket, he was almost to the sideline. Instead of throwing it away, he gets sacked, and now the Cowboys are punting when they could have kicked a field
Yeah,
goal.
and he
Not that the
pumped
3
it
points,
twice.
yeah, yeah, and I watched a replay.
It made me so mad.
It's not like the guy came from behind. He's like, oh crap, I don't have time. Like they were
No, he
like
was
doing a
right in
little
front of him,
dance.
and
He
he
was,
pump faked him
yeah,
twice.
and
I was
nearly.
like, throw the ball.
Yeah, throw the ball out of
You're
bounds.
out of the pocket.
Kick your probably a 50-yard field goal, something like that. Not
Yeah.
that the 3 points would have made a difference, but it's a lot of little things like this where Dak is a great statistic quarterback in the regular season, and I don't know what it is. Call it pressure, big game, whatever. He just can't perform in the play. He's had one good game against the Bucks last
It's
year. They beat the Seahawks. I don't think he had a great stat lining in that
Well,
one.
no, it was more so. I think Zeke had a big game that game or something
yeah.
Yeah,
like.
and
But it's driving me crazy because just like you're saying, is it just seems like Dak doesn't have great football IQ because we did the same thing. Well, I think it was last season, wasn't it? When it was the poor clock management in the final game of the season.
Oh, he ran up,
Um,
rushed, and then couldn't get the spike.
yeah,
Yeah, that was
yeah,
that
a
was
couple
last.
of years ago. No, I think just the last regular season is what he was meaning.
yeah, yeah. But it's like he does this, like he does these what just seems like silly kind of dumb plays, because just like you're saying, he rolled out, he was well out of the pocket, and the fact that he pump faked twice like drove me extra crazy because it was like, why didn't you just throw it the second time? Like he didn't bite on that pump fake. He's not going to bite
It,
on a
it,
second. You
it
know what
was
I mean?
like he
But
didn't
like,
know they were in field goal range. Like he was thinking, it doesn't matter if I throw it away or not. A sack's a sack, whatever. I'll hold it for an extra second because we're punting anyways. To me, that's what it looked
yeah,
like.
but I just can't imagine like what goes through a quarterback's mind where he's like, oh, taking a sack is okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like just off the top of my head, I can only think of very, very few situations where you would be okay with taking a sack. And
Joe,
in fact, the majority of the time, it's like you don't want to take a sack because of the way like the clock keeps running, the yardage you lose, the down you lose. You know what I mean? Like it's just all so negative that like I feel like 99% of the time it's like don't take a sack,
Yeah.
get rid of it.
Joe Burrow said something about how he like on third down sacks aren't that big of a deal or something like that. I think it's like something in
Depending on your field
I,
position, yeah, because I mean, like the Cowboys took a false start
I,
right after that
it
to
was
punt
like
the
Yeah.
ball away.
it was a quote that he had said. I think the interview clip that I saw was like out of context, but I'm like third down sacks. Those are like, especially depending on where you are, those are the biggest. Those
Yeah, when it moves you from a potential 50 to 55-yard
you
field goal
got
attempt to out,
yeah, and
Um,
Dak made those plays throughout the year.
I
Uh,
mean,
it's he's just never made them in the playoffs.
maybe McCarthy told him, "Hey, we're not kicking a field goal no matter what here, anyways," because just like when
Down was
That's what I thought they should have did, but it
like
didn't.
at the end of the half when they went for the touchdown, they got the touchdown, but they went for it instead of field goal
Yeah.
because 27-7 is better than 27-3. They were down at that point. Maybe McCarthy said, "Just don't worry about it. We're not kicking a field goal regardless." I don't know, but it seemed done to me. Um,
That was the strategy I wanted them to take coming out of halftime. They got the ball back and they just scored that touchdown. And
yeah,
honestly, like you said, just before that pick six, it was already a 2-minute drill. And it was like, I totally agree because I was thinking the same thing. It was like, if Cowboys manage to get down and score and they make this score going into halftime 20-7,
yeah,
they get the ball back coming back, like that's a different game. Because even if you come back and you kick the field goal, it's 10-20, different
because
beast, right? But
because what they were doing
now it's
wasn't
the pick six, and
yeah, what they were doing wasn't like Green Bay was shutting them down. The Cowboys were shooting themselves in the foot. They were throwing that threw the
yes,
bad pick earlier. Him and CD just weren't on the same page, which kind of makes you feel maybe a little better. Like, hey, they just have to figure that out, and they can go back. It's not Green Bay's not necessarily doing anything to it. So I thought you just get on track, score a touchdown here. Then you're not letting Green Bay get back on the field, and then you
right.
can just do a double dip, and now the pressure's on them. It's a one possession
Yeah.
game. Um, but I think we've hated on Dak enough. We've already,
Yeah.
there's nothing
it's
they're
never
going to
enough.
do.
It'll
Well,
never be enough.
there's nothing they can do about Dak, but there's definitely something they can do
Yeah.
about Mike McCarthy. Uh, Chris, we'll start with you. What do you think should happen, and what do you think is going to happen in terms of Mike McCarthy getting fired or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I have him right here. Um, and he calls the plays too, correct?
Yeah.
So,
He did this year.
I mean, I just feel like that them trying to force CD the ball so much, I feel like their best offense, their best games are when Brandon Cooks has like 60 yards, when Marcus Gallup has like 50 yards.
Yeah, they have a lot of weapons. They don't
Yeah,
have to, do that every single game.
maybe relieve him of those duties. I personally don't want him as a coach. Truthfully, I feel like he's 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 kind of like Jason Garrett in the sense we need somebody that's going to come in and actually like change the culture because I feel like the Jerry Jones just picks people that he know how to manage and this is my team but you can coach it as opposed to if they bring in a Bill Belichick or somebody of
They did
that
with Bill Parcells, and Bill Parcells took Quincy Carter to the playoffs.
so like have somebody that can actually bring their own culture because no one thinks of Mike McCarthy as a Super Bowl champion coach. They think of Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback, and he was just. So it's like
Yeah,
so like Bill Belichick. or somebody along those lines, like someone that has some sort of like structure, somebody that has some sort of stature and background, um, that can establish a culture because that's what this team needs. They that's what they're missing. Um, like I
They're
don't I really it was I told one of my friends I was like something has to happen if they lose this game, which they shouldn't,
yeah.
and I bet actually on the Cowboys for some dumb reason, and uh
I wish I would have hedged my bet
yeah,
on Green Bay just to make myself feel better if they lost.
I've
I,
always thought about that if I would bet against if I was betting. I've never betted on or against the Cowboys, but thought just bet against them. Either way, I win, right?
I win. So
Yeah, I'll be
Right. Yeah.
happy.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, if they brought Mike McCarthy back, I say bring back. He's under contract. But if they kept him, hell, they'd probably win 10, 11, 12 games next year too. But
because there's 4 or 5 wins guaranteed in the NFC East. So, uh, and then next year I think we have the AFC.
and Mike McCarthy, I kind of compare like in your mind to Dak Prescott. I think Mike McCarthy can, he obviously has won a Super Bowl, but he had to have Aaron Rodgers. I think Dak Prescott can win a Super Bowl as a quarterback of a team, but he can't, be the guy. Like we've said all year, he's kind of made me look sort of like an idiot. Like, man, he's an MVP caliber quarterback this year. But I just don't think McCarthy and Dak can win together. I think you either need, like you said, a stronger, more in control coach, not just calling the plays, but he's like, buck ends with me type.
Mm.
Or if you have a Mike McCarthy type, you have, Aaron Rodgers was the reason you won the Super Bowl. Not that he's not a good coach. I think Dak's a great quarterback and Mike McCarthy's a great coach. But I just don't think they're to that elite level. I think the right quarterback, like Aaron Rodgers, makes Mike McCarthy an elite coach. I think the right coach might make Dak look more elite. I'm not sure at this point because, maybe Bill Belichick will just use him for example because he's available. Maybe he watched Dak and be like, I know what he's doing because we have no clue. He looks completely different from regular season to playoffs minus one playoff game against Tampa last year.
Mhm.
Although uh, Bill Belichick's a defensive coach, but just using him as an example, maybe you get the right coach in there, the right offensive mind, because yeah, if you get rid of Mike McCarthy, regardless if he played called the plays or not,
Or maybe keep him as an OC and then you
see,
know
I don't. Well, one, I
I,
don't
That
think
would be
he'd do
cool.
that. Two, depending on who you bring in here, they're going to bring in. I mean, you're either going to bring in like a Bill Belichick, who there's no way he's going to keep Mike McCarthy. He's going to bring in his own guys, or two, you're going to bring in like, what's that? Brandon Jones. I can't remember his name, but a young guy who there's no way Mike McCarthy's going to stay as an assistant for, you know. Um, I,
Honestly, I think the biggest issue here is that it's hard to find a coach that can bring a culture and do all of that he needs to do inside the locker room and everything without Jerry Jones
yeah,
coming in and doing what he
I,
wants to do, you
I
know?
think
And
oh,
honestly, that's the biggest reason I'm going to say that I would imagine. And honestly, I think it's tough because I would imagine Jerry Jones wants to punish somebody for what just happened to the Cowboys. And McCarthy's probably the one that's going to take it because there aren't,
it
I
can't
mean,
be
you're not going to
Dak,
do anything about Dak or anything, you know?
Yeah,
And then, but like, who do you replace him with? Because I can't imagine a guy like Belichick coming into Dallas. He's not going to mesh well with Jerry.
yeah,
You know, like Belichick's going to want to do things the way he does things, and it's the way he's always been allowed to run football teams. Like
yeah,
that's why he even left New York and went to New England because they were like, you can do whatever you want, man, and he did, and for like 20 years, you know. So it's like I can't imagine somebody like Belichick coming down here. I would love to see somebody like younger with like a new, fresh kind of take on offense and how we like approach the game and stuff. Kind of McCarthy like even, but or not McCarthy, but in Miami.
oh
McDaniel.
Mike McDaniel.
McDaniel, thank you. Um, you know, with just that young, kind of fresh, rejuvenated, you know, thing he's got going on in Miami. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I enjoy it, and it took him pretty far this year. And with a guy like Tua, I mean, you know, I'd love to see something like that, but man, it's just I think it's so hard to get anything like that going here in Dallas because of Jerry. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
Jerry's world,
think
you know, and we're all living in it.
I think you can do a lot by changing, not necessarily the culture because that's obviously a challenge, but just the different offensive schemes. But with that, I mean, if you would
Well, I
have,
mean, and Dan Quinn's more than
that's
likely
what I was
leaving
about to bring up.
too.
If you would have told me that Packers are going to be the Cowboys and told me nothing else, I would say, well, Dan Quinn's about to be the head coach. But I don't know now how how that came across. And now you look at um, the game against Buffalo where they just ran all over him, where it's looking like Dan Quinn's schemes are getting a little more exposed as time goes on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would think Jerry would be more likely. Not that this is going to happen. I mean, if you get rid of the head coach, I don't know that he's going after Dan Quinn. He'll probably interview him because, Jerry's not one to humiliate guys on their way out. Like he will tell you this day he didn't fire Jason Garrett. He's like, well, Jason Garrett's contract was up. We just didn't renew it.
Right.
Like, you fired him.
Yeah.
Whereas McCarthy's gone, yeah, we're going to hire Dan Quinn. Interview Dan Quinn. We're going to interview everyone with no intent. But I think he's more likely to keep McCarthy and fire Dan Quinn and be like, you to your idea of I have to punish somebody. And really you look at, if you take the stats, if you take the score and you don't watch the game, you show somebody, you look like, why are you blaming Dak? He scored 32 points. He threw 400 yards. Yeah, he threw a couple interceptions, but we don't know the context of that. That defense gave up. And I think it's easy for somebody like Jerry Jones, who's very well articulated. He could talk, anybody out of anything. If you ever, it would be my dream to interview him or something like that. And like, he would be probably the most affectionate guy you could talk to, and having you eating out of the palm of his hand. But I mean,
for sure. I've heard some interviews Jerry does, and I'm like, man, you just convinced me to get
I love
right
Jerry.
back into these
I love
Cowboys.
Jerry Jones.
Like, coming right back now.
But he can, I could see him firing Dan Quinn and being like, look at that defense. The offense wasn't going to do anything with that defense. And you can have counterpoints, but he's like, I mean, what do you want to do? You want to just start all over and fire everybody? Which I think coaches are the easiest, could be the easiest transition to improvement, because you're not really starting all over. We've seen lots of times a coach comes in to a talented, underachieving team, which is the definition of Dallas right now, and change things. I mean, you could hire a whole new staff and it may just not jive. It may not work. It seems like you need something really specific for Dak. And maybe a new coach could do that. The right offensive mind where he's helping out Dak, and I think he'd be more likely to be a young guy than anything.
This is so frustrating. You have the most all pros in the game.
Yeah.
To get done like that at home in front of everybody.
Vent.
Like, it's just,
it doesn't make sense. I heard somebody say they said it looked like they were throwing the game, and they compared it to the 1919 White Sox, which, I mean, obviously they didn't throw the game. Different situations. The Black Sox. They're making tons of money, which wasn't the thing with the White Sox or Black Sox. But it's not that we thought there was a chance or like, ooh, conspiracy theory, they threw the game. But that's how bad it looked and how off they looked. It looked like somebody went up to them and said, hey, we're going to kidnap your wives and your kids if y'all don't throw this game or something. I mean, because they look like they played hard, but they just didn't know what the hell they were doing. So thought, like, what are y'all's thoughts? Do y'all think Dan Quinn has a chance to run this team? Or let's say, you have Mike McCarthy, Dan Quinn, throw Bill Belichick in there, or insert coach. Who's running this team next year? Where do y'all think? Not what do y'all think should happen? What do y'all think will happen?
I'm so disengaged from them right now. Like, I could
that's a safe space where I'm gonna watch them. I'm just not gonna get upset or too excited.
Like, every time I hear something talk about him. I'm just
Like this was the clear path. This was your year to make the NFC Championship game.
I was actually just saying this. This was their best chance to make the Super Bowl. And it's probably the most disappointing playoff loss probably since maybe the Giants with Tony Romo in '07.
Let,
I
let
think
me
of
let me
more
go on there because I think this is
as far as like
it,
expectation. I
yeah,
feel like
maybe this is recency biased and we're just so emotional, but I do think this is a pivotal point in this franchise because we've seen where they don't play well, but they lose by a touchdown to San Francisco.
yeah,
Twice the last 2 years. They lose to Green Bay. Oh, Dez caught it. Like there's so much room to say they were almost there. I don't have to fire this guy. I don't have to do this because they played their butts off and they almost had it.
right.
This has been so embarrassing, so unlikely that this had happened. And throw what you said, Chris, expectations. Because it wasn't like, oh, they barely made it into the playoffs. Yeah, they might win this round, but if you win this round, you're hosting next round. Depending on how things go, you're either playing Detroit, who you beat, you're playing Philadelphia, who you beat. You might play the Rams, who you already beat, or Tampa, which I wouldn't say they scared me last week. I don't know that they scare you, but Baker Mayfield's looking pretty good.
Yeah.
He's just on one of those runs. And then you're like, okay, you make it the NFC Championship game, and who knows what happens against San Francisco. Maybe you'll play them close. Who knows? And then obviously in the AFC, the Chiefs are off this year. The Ravens look pretty good, but they didn't look great all year. This is one of those years where you could, be a glass half full kind of guy and be like, this is their best shot. And being the 2 seed, but you go embarrassment, unlikeliness, the expectations with how easy your playoff schedule kind of looked. It's just ridiculous how they would put that up and lose like that. That
Just expectation for me because I'm never the type to say this is like the year. This is the Cowboys' year.
Yeah, this
But
wasn't their year where I'm saying they're going to win. This is their year where I'm saying they need to take advantage and win.
you got to take advantage when you have 2 home games, and your hardest game would have been. I mean, it's a tough game going to San Fran and getting the dub, but like you can anybody can win on any given night, and I feel like
You would have been favored
yeah,
outside of the San Francisco
would have been
game.
favored. You would have been favored. Well, you were favored by a lot in the first round. You would have been favored in the second round, and then San Fran would have been probably like a 3-point, 4-point spread, especially depending on how you looked the first 2 rounds. So it's like they. I don't know, it's just tough. And then the AFC, like you said, is wide open. But I mean, I don't really. I didn't even want to watch the rest of the games, on Sunday. But I don't know.
Dan, you've been suspiciously quiet for a couple of minutes. It looks like you're just
Man,
about to go off right now.
it's just I I mean, in all honesty, I feel like the Cowboys are always kind of a crazy wild card in the off season. Um, I don't feel like I necessarily expected them to kind of like what you were saying, Ashton, like because they didn't necessarily fire Jason Garrett, but I wasn't necessarily expecting him to like let him go, but it didn't like surprise me too much. So I feel the situation feels like very similar. And as mad as I am at this whole situation, man, there's a part of me that's like, let's let's run it back, like let's just try and do it again next year. But I mean, the NFL as a whole is also just kind of a fickle mistress, and I mean, teams are obviously going to reach out to Dan Quinn. He's a top candidate for one of these head coaching
And if
jobs,
Dan Quinn does
and
not
a
take
number
a
of
coaching
places.
job this year, I mean, this is the time. After that, what he just put up, it might go away if he comes back next year. And I think most teams are willing to
Yeah,
look away. Like if they brought back Dan Quinn, he's still a defensive coordinator, I wouldn't be pissed because you're looking at 3 great years with a game here and there, like what happened, and then a playoff game where I was like, okay, I trust you. Look at the tape, figure out what the hell's going on. But I think most teams are going to be like that. Where I don't think a team's going to be like, no, we were interested, but never mind.
yeah,
So if he doesn't take, I can't imagine him not, unless Jerry Jones just says, come back, here's a ton of money, which that would be dumb for Jerry Jones to do now after that performance. But I'm kind of with you. Like, you're pretty much bringing your team back anyways.
Yeah.
Outside of the coaching staff. Now, if I don't think Belichick would be a great fit here anyways.
Yeah, me neither.
I think because Dak is your main wild card, like, they have a very talented team. Their defense has a ton of talent. They have a lot of issues. But honestly, with the issue of possibly the possibility of, bringing that back, and, you're going to get the same result. But if you don't have like a surefire offense of mind coming into coach and maybe making a difference for Dak, I'm kind of the same way. Like, you had success in the regular season. You're not getting rid of Dak. There's no way, not without being a bottom feeder for a few years.
Yeah.
Like, let's see. Hopefully y'all can figure out what the hell happened, because nobody else can, and fix it.
It's all on Dak, I feel like. And I'm not a Dak. I don't hate Dak. I think you can't get anybody else better than him. If, like, you're gonna trade.
You're gonna have to luck out and draft somebody. There's nobody on the market that will happen.
Yeah.
But Dak's obviously not going to get better, though. He's like, this is it. This is the apex of Dak, I think.
I think you could manage to get Dak. Like, it's not going to be, light years better than what he already is. But I think if you were to bring in, because honestly, man, if you got like a good head coach, like quarterback head coach, like Pete Carroll or something, to like really give him like some knowledge and understanding of like the position just a little bit better than what he's got, it might give him a better fighting chance. You know what I mean? Honestly, an interesting guy that I'd be interested to see come to Dallas would be somebody like Mike Vrabel or something.
Yeah.
I like the way he runs his offense and stuff. But to be honest, I it feels so stupid to even say it, but it's like I just said, like there's a part of me that just wants to like run it back, just bring McCarthy and everybody back. But the thing to me too is like,
it wasn't
like how upset can I be when the Cowboys like do that and they run it back next season and then they lose in the first round again? And it's like, the definition of insanity. Yeah. And it's like, well, of course we did, like we didn't change anything. We came back. How were we expecting it to be any different, So, it's such a complicated situation. And I'm glad I'm not the one making the money calls here, but
they were a good team. It's just how bad it was in the playoffs that makes everything else, it just pales in comparison, because in reality, it was a great season up until 5 days ago. And I feel like next year, if we're in the same position, we'll probably bring up the fact that they lost by, $1 million to the Packers. But we will still have that same excitement about, this is a chance. If everything moved this year to next year, I just feel like I feel like something has to change, because I don't know. It's just, I don't know. But I also, there is something in me as well, Dan, that says like, like they laid an egg, run it back. But
I was gonna say that too. Whereas, okay, let's say they did come back because the Packers collapsed, not because the Cowboys did great, but they won. Would you assume that they'd play the same way the next week? Because you go back and look how bad they played against the Cardinals, given they didn't have a lot of their offensive line. After that, they won 6 of their next 7. The one loss was that close game to the Eagles. Do you just expect, like, well, even if they would have beat Green Bay playing like that,
I think better. I think
like maybe they would have figured it out, like, holy crap, guys, we got to get this fixed. Sometimes you'd rather them play like that against a team like, Green Bay rather than,
because it's going to look disgusting.
So with that thought, bringing it back, you'll say, okay, let's win 10 to 12 games. We're going to have a couple of games against really crappy teams and lose. Because if you had an opportunity where, okay, Dak's contract's up, I think you look a little more into that. Now, not saying get rid of Dak necessarily, because look at your draft position. You'd have to luck out to get a good quarterback. And I remember roughly the years between, before you got Romo, when you were throwing Vinny Testaverde and Brad Johnson and Chad Hutchinson. And I think Jerry does too. That's why he gave Dak the big contract in the first place, going through that quarterback limbo hell where you have a
Miss you,
good
Romo.
team. You have a, yeah, right. You have a window of probably 2 seasons before you have to start. I mean, you're going to have to pay CD Lamb and Micah Parsons and figure out extending Dak and do all this kind of stuff. Whereas you just want to see how the next year runs and then say, okay, let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's rebuild for 3 years, which Jerry is not going to do that.
And next year, I feel like you just have to. I'm not opposed to going in next year, saying in the bag. Like I said, the whole year for the most part, it was a great year. And I'm being a little bit of a homer by saying if they played the Packers 3 times, I feel like they would win that series 2 out of 3. But like it's football,
I was gonna say the same thing. It's like 9 times out of 10,
yeah.
Cowboys win that
It's just
game.
it's
But
just
would you expect that one loss
Well,
to
at the
Green
same
Bay to be such a blowout?
well, at the
Like,
same
come
time though, how I mean,
on. Ugh.
maybe this is a young team. Maybe we're seeing the beginning of a Green Bay dynasty. I don't know. If you look
That
at
the,
you look at what happened with Jordan Love, where he didn't play good at the beginning, and then he started putting it together. That maybe this is his first season starting. He said a couple of years behind Rodgers. Maybe he was just getting into his groove, and I don't know that it would make you feel better. But what if Jordan Love goes on a 12-year, the next 12 years, winning a few MVPs? Uh, I think we'd look back and be like, okay, that made a little more sense. Not that they should have got blown out, but that they misinterpreted what Jordan Love was more as, yeah, if you
sure.
play again tomorrow knowing what you know, I bet you the Cowboys, I mean, I think the Cowboys would still be favored. The Cowboys would play completely different. I think they were looking at Jordan Love as an inferior quarterback where, I mean, he's a middle of the road quarterback. He's had a pretty good season, the last few weeks. And we just need to worry about Aaron Jones, which
Yeah,
that didn't necessarily
honestly
work.
it drove me crazy when they pointed out that like Green Bay was like the youngest team and whatever.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you noticed this or whatever, but it was pointed out to me at the beginning of the game. They're like, "Oh, Green Bay, the youngest team in the playoffs, whatever." The Cowboys are the second youngest team by like 6 months. So I
Yeah.
mean, what are we really talking about? If we're talking
also
about young teams with potential, Cowboys got that too, and I think it's another one of those kind of variable factors we keep
Most,
talking about that makes it so
yeah.
difficult to figure out what to do in the off season. Because I mean, obviously player contracts are up and players will, try and go wherever they want to go and, get paid and
I don't
whatever
know.
their motivating factor is, but when you start,
also
also looking at coaches and
Yeah.
who's leaving and who you can get to stay and all that, man, it's a messy situation to be in. And I don't think there's any right answer. I don't think there's any, well, I'm sure there's plenty of wrong answers, but
Yeah.
it's going to be an interesting offseason. I think I'd definitely like to see the Cowboys do something, but I feel like at the moment I'm so hurt by the Cowboys. I don't know what I
Because
want them
I
to do.
think most people would agree one way or the other. Jerry Jones is the issue because he's the only, dominant
Yes,
factor since
yeah,
1996. But the same with Prescott. There's nothing happening unless you're wishing for him to die or something. But then again, is Steven Jones, a better answer? So that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, yeah, McCarthy has faults, Dak has faults, but are you just, are you really improving things, bringing in, just firing Mike McCarthy just because of the embarrassment? Because if you look at the difference, like the Eagles, how the Eagles played, it looked like their team was kind of giving up on their coach. I didn't
yeah.
see that with the Cowboys. Like when your locker room has given up on you, you pretty much have no other option than to get a new coach. But I don't know. I mean, we praised Dan Quinn the last 3 years. Um, they weren't liking him in Atlanta. That was the year they lost. I mean, they gave up like 3 huge comebacks, and one of them was the Cowboys. Remember the watermelon onside kick. Uh, Sometimes a change of scenery can help, and maybe you bring in a new coach like a Vrabel, where you're looking at it as a retread, but sometimes the right situations, maybe that uh, fires or lights a fire under Dak's ass or something, and he just cleans up a little bit here and a little bit there. I'm not sure. I'm not a quarterback expert, so I can't, speak to, hey, hire this guy. He's going to fix Dak, because that's where you're at right now. Because there's no way you can get rid of Dak right now. Like it's not happening unless you just again want to say, hey, we're going to rebuild for 3 years because we don't have the cap space.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, guys? Any closing words? We don't have to talk about all the playoffs, but who's y'all's Super Bowl matchup? Dan, let's go with you.
Super Bowl matchup, man.
At least in the NFC. Like, do you see any of these teams, any upsets happening?
The NFC team I'm rooting for at this point. I'm kind of pulling for Detroit. I'd like to see them
Yeah.
take it the distance. Honestly, almost kind of crazy. They're one of the oldest teams in the NFL. No Super Bowl. So I mean that'd be a cool one to see. To
I
be
think
honest, it almost feels like a few years ago when I was rooting for Atlanta to get there first, and then Tom Brady did Tom Brady things.
yeah.
Oh,
I thought it'd be kind of interesting, not that I'm cheering for it because I don't really like the Packers, but if the Packers were able to upset the 49ers, it would kind of take some of the light off of Dallas. Whereas
yeah,
like, oh look, I mean, they upset the 49ers too. And then the story of the this year's playoffs might be the Packers resurgence rather than the Cowboys collapse.
Yeah, so that's
well, if
just
the 49ers don't get Christian McCaffrey at like 100%, I'm not sure they'll be
Yeah,
able to pull
I
that
don't
game
know
off.
that that'll happen.
Brock
It's just
Purdy's
kind
been
of
playing good ball and everything, but that offense is all McCarthy. I mean, without McCarthy like really putting in the work, I have a harder time kind of rooting for the 49ers. I'd
yeah.
also like to see the Bills keep their momentum going. They've really kind of cleaned it up a bit. Um, Baltimore's also been playing well. I need Kansas City to lose. I'm so tired of Arrowhead Stadium and Mahomes and Andy Reid. And it's crazy too, because don't get me wrong, when Andy Reid and Mahomes first started working together and everything, they won that first Super Bowl. I was not surprised. Those two are a match made in heaven. Just a perfect head coach and quarterback combination there. And man, I think it was you, Ashton, said like last week that it's just like Kansas City to kind of figure it out at playoff time, like going to the playoffs,
uh,
Yeah.
ready to play some ball. And I mean, they did, man. I mean, it was not an easy game against Miami. I mean, Miami struggled in that
and
weather and everything, but
Yeah,
yeah,
when it's 20 degrees below zero, I don't know that you really take anything from that game. Then
yeah,
they manage the cold better, and I guess we'll see Mahomes'
yeah,
first ever road playoff game against the Bills. I think that's going to be a good game because I think the Bills are coming
that'll be a great game.
at just the right time.
mm,
Um, Chris,
Well, I mean, Josh Allen and Mahomes always kind of put up a great
yeah, I'm
matchup.
hoping
So
for chaos and quadruple overtime or something weird like that. I want that. Maybe like the end of the game a couple of years ago where it was just like with 2 minutes left, they both scored a couple of touchdowns or something ridiculous like that.
yeah,
That's all I want now is just chaos and good games. Now that the Cowboys are out, it stings, but it's a little easier to watch the playoffs without that nervousness having the Cowboys in the game or what matchups. And now it's like let's just watch football if you can. I know some people that can't watch
real
football
tough.
just good. Like when the Cowboys lose, they can't watch Sunday Night Football that week or whatever. So depending and this was not a good loss. Chris, do you see any other surprises, like any crazy Super Bowl matchups or anything happening the rest of the way?
I mean, right now I have uh, San Fran, Kansas City. Uh,
Okay.
I I know Baltimore; they've had a great year, but I feel
Yeah.
like LeBron has those same type of like allegations, quote unquote, in the playoffs as Dak does.
Yeah. Yeah,
He
he
does
can put up the stats. Yeah, but he hasn't, necessarily proven in the playoffs.
playoffs. So I mean, we'll see. They have a pretty easy one next week. Well, not easy one, but uh, that's actually going to be a tough game. But uh, I think San Francisco and it'll come down to either Kansas City or uh, the winner of
Buffalo.
Kansas.
Yeah,
Buffalo.
that's what I was about to say. Like I think it's San Francisco. It's just even more wide open now, unless the Packers really are, coming up, and that's what we're just now seeing. But I think it's San Francisco, and then whoever wins out of Buffalo, Kansas City, because even if Lamar Jackson and the Ravens do uh, win this next game against it, which I think they will. I don't see C.J. Stroud's a great quarterback, but I just don't think it's their time yet.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
What's the conspiracy theory say? The 49ers and the Ravens, I think it
yeah,
was.
because it's red and purple.
Red and purple.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's the most obvious choice, and I think maybe like after the football season's over, we should have a show about that because I got in a discussion about that. Or well, it was more like
Honestly, it was just recently. It was pointed out to me this season. I had never really noticed it or heard it before, and then somebody was saying like, "Oh, the scheme says this is how it's supposed to go this
yeah,
year," and I was like, "Well, we'll see." But here we are, man. That playoff bracket was made, and the two teams with the buys were those picks. I was like, "Okay, maybe
maybe there's something
conspiracies have a
to it.
place in the
Yeah.
world." Like,
Hey man, when I think it was just me and Chris on here. We talked about weird uh, uh, curses in
Yeah.
sports that I don't necessarily believe them, but there's something going on
oh, for
sometimes, and
sure.
it
I
and
mean,
it can't
I'm
and it
not.
can't be that. Oh well, it's just rigged. Well, not that I'm saying it's not rigged or Vegas doesn't have a point. Sure, but just some weird ass stuff happens, especially in
Yeah.
baseball. That
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
it's just
I'm
crazy.
not superstitious, but I am a
I'm a
little
little
stitious.
stitious. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Okay, guys. Yeah, I think we're all kind of on the same wavelength with the Super Bowl, but maybe next week, maybe 49ers lose, maybe
Maybe
Ravens
next
lose.
season.
I don't know. Well,
Mm.
we'll talk next week
Yeah.
maybe. But guys, until next time,
Cowboys, please. Oh God.
do something. Yeah, do something. Make us all
Yeah.
feel better. Let,
Yeah.
Figure it
raise
out,
that
man.
high up, and then this time next year we'll talk again about how they
Yeah.
disappointed
Well,
us.
maybe by then I'll have my energy back for the Cowboys, but for now I'm a
Right.
beaten
Yeah,
ass.
I'm kind of with Chris. Like I'm just kind of separated from that, right? Like emotionally
Yeah.
detached. But guys, until next time, make sure to go follow us so you know every time one of these episodes drops. See you later, guys.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.